Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ansu Esterhuis and I will be presenting the memo discussion on Life Science Paper 2 for the preparatory exam, the trial exam in September. So let's just start with that. If we have a look at the memo, the marking guidelines, I just want to emphasize two things when we start here. Again, spelling errors, if it is recognizable, accept the answer provided it doesn't not mean something else in life science, or if it's not out of context, you can allocate a mark there. And the second part I just want to emphasize, be sensitive to the sense of an answer which may be stated in a different way than it is on the memo. So with that out of the way, let's get started with the paper. So multiple questions. Question number 1. The part of the human ear that amplifies vibrations. The correct answer will there be B. That would be 2 marks there for the correct answer, B. A gardener regularly removes the apical buds from a rose bush in her garden. As a result, the rose bush will, if you remember well, there were a question on this similar to this in the November 2020 paper. So question number 1.1.2 will be A, it produces more lateral branches, so that would be number A. Number 1.1.3, which one of the following is an advantage of the testis being in the scrotum outside the body cavity? So if it's outside the body cavity, number B will also be the correct answer. Sperm formation is more efficient at temperatures below the normal body temperature. So the correct answer again will be number B. Number 1.1.4, the membrane in an amniotic egg that is mainly associated with gases exchange. We had a lot of questions on this, so let us just emphasize the important parts here. It is mainly associated with gases exchange. So therefore the correct answer will also be number B, the chorion. So again, the lantois is responsible for excreting waste, and it takes a part in the gases exchange, but mainly associated with that will only be number B, therefore that would be the correct answer there. Number 1.1.5, which combination of reproductive strategies applies to organisms that lay amniotic eggs? That would be number D, it's ovipary and it's internal fertilization. So there are those first answers, B, A, B, B, and number D. So if we continue to the next question, that would be question 1.1.6. The graph below shows the relationship between the secretion of growth hormone and age. As you can clearly see here, we have age, it's from 10 up until 19, and the amount of growth hormone secreted from 0 up to 2000. So the correct answer for number 1.1.6 will then be B. The amount of growth hormone secreted decreases with age. So the correct answer there will be number B. 1.1.7, if you can continue there, the following is a list of the functions of some female reproductive hormones. So there are different options: thickening of the endometrium, development of the female sex organs, stimulation of the follicle development, development of broader hips, stimulates ovulation. So this question is specifically on estrogen, so it is the functions of only estrogen. So the correct answer will there be number C, because number C will be the one that is thickening of the endometrium. It will be the development of the female sex organs, and it will be broader hips, the secondary sexual characteristics. So that will be number C. Question 1.1.8. The diagram below shows a visual defect. So when the image is formed in front of the retina and not on the retina, this defect as shown here will then be number D, nearsightedness or myopia. So that would be the correct answer, will then be number D. 1.1.9. Which of the following is an effect of the sympathetic nervous system? So the sympathetic nervous system will be an increase in heart rate. Number A will be an increase in the heart rate. Constriction of the pupils, it will be dilation of the pupils if it was sympathetic nervous system. So that is the answers for 1.1.9. Then if we go to 1.1.10, which one of the following shows the correct sequence of the development of the fertilized ovum? So the correct answer will there be number C, the zygote, morula, blastocyst, and then the fetus. That is the correct sequence. So number 1.1.10 will be number C. If we go to number 1.2, a reproductive strategy where the fetus develops inside the uterus of the mother and is nourished by the placenta, it would be vivipary. Then a disorder that results from damage to the myelin sheath of the neurons will be multiple sclerosis. And there I would like to add in the Afrikaans memo, because the Afrikaans memo at this stage says veelvuldige sklerose, and in the Afrikaans memo we can add multiple sclerose or multiple sclerosis. It will also be marked correctly. But we cannot at this stage only mark MS, because this is a biological term, so we are not allowed to only mark the abbreviation MS. That is not correct. The hormone secreted by the thyroid gland that controls the metabolic rate is thyroxine. So the type of development where offspring are well developed and can move and feed themselves immediately after hatching is precocial. The maintenance of a constant internal environment is homeostasis. And then we have the part of the ear that directs sound waves into the external auditory channel. That would be the pinna. So again, there were questions on this question, because there is an external, but in most of the references that we used, external auditory channel is correct. So in the Afrikaans paper, they had oorskulp or pinna. So please emphasize the fact that pinna is the biological term in this case. So even though they are allocating a mark for oorskulp, just make note that it must be pinna is the biological term for that. And external auditory channel is the correct biological term, therefore. Can also be the auditory channel in the external part of the ear. But then number 1.2.7, the plant hormone that promotes seed dormancy is abscisic acid. And then if we go to 1.8, the part of the ear that equalizes pressure on either side of the tympanic membrane is the Eustachian tube. And the last one there, the hormone that stimulates the production of milk will be prolactin. So those are the biological terms in question 1.2. At this stage, that is what we are accepting. So if we go to question number 1.3, the place where fertilization occurs in humans is only A, so that would be the fallopian tube, so it's being A only. Number 1.3.2, the type of gland that has a duct that carry its secretion to where it is needed. So that would be an exocrine gland, so that would be B only. And then the last question we have is the parental care one, keeping the young warm and providing food. So both of those two, so both A and B will be correct according to the marking guidelines for this paper. Question 1.4, we're on the skin and the environmental conditions. The diagram below represents the skin in a person under different environmental conditions. I would like to emphasize a few things in this question based on marking session of 2020 last year or at the beginning of this year. So there's a few pointers that I think is very important that we look at. Number 1.4.1, identify part X. Part X will then be the sweat gland. Give the letter of the diagram that shows the skin on a hot day. So that would be number B. So the correct answer will there be the sweat gland, and then number B. If we go to give two visible reasons for your answer in question 1.4.2, the visible answers will then be the person is sweating more, sweat drops are visible. So it doesn't need to be more like there. If you look here, you can also, only the fact that there are sweat drops visible is an explanation or is used as evidence. And then vasodilation has occurred. So if vasodilation is mentioned, that is an easy mark there. But please, when they discuss it and they say capillaries are diluted, capillaries is mandatory. You cannot only use vessels or blood vessels or things like that. If we have any question on the skin and the blood supply to the skin, we are supposed to use those terminology like the capillaries in the surface of the skin. Those are the two things that is very important. We always need to refer to the surface of the skin and not only the skin when we are explaining something on these questions. And we need to mention that the capillaries in the surface of the skin and not only blood vessels. So that is important, so that if you can mention that to your learners. So name, number 1.4.4, name the part of the brain that regulates body temperature. That is hypothalamus. So that is an easy one. And then name one hormone that has the same effect as seen in diagram A. Diagram A will then be vasoconstriction, where the capillaries in the surface of the skin is diluted, they are restricted. So then we have less blood flow to the surface of the skin. So therefore, the correct answer will be adrenaline, has the same effect, and the hypothalamus is the part of the brain that stimulates, is stimulated by temperature regulation. That brings us to the end of section number A. That brings us to the end of question number 1.4. Question number 1.5, the diagram below represents the human brain. So let's look at this. Give the letter and the name of the part that. So we need the letter and the name for the following parts. Is damage when a person has to be supported by a heart-lung machine. So that would be heart rate and a regulation of your breathing. So that would then definitely be E, the medulla oblongata, that is situated there. So it's 1 mark for E, medulla oblongata, and 1 mark for medulla oblongata. If we go to the next question, connects the two hemispheres, that would then be number H, that would be the corpus callosum. So if we go to the memo, That would be number H, Corpus Callosum. Back again at number C, consists of grey matter on the inside and the white matter on the outside. That would be your spinal cord. So that would be number D, and it will be the spinal cord. D, spinal cord. In the brain it will be vice versa. Number D is injured when a person suffers from serious memory loss. So that would then be number G, the cerebellum. So this is the label that we have for the cerebellum here. So the correct answer will be G, cerebellum. But because there's a bracket here showing the meninges, and those are the three membranes there, but a lot of questions came on this, and we are also going to accept number B. So this is addition on the memo, please. For cerebrum, you can either mark the G or the B. So please make a note of that we can also accept then number B as an addition to that for the cerebrum. And the last part is give the function of number A. Number A will be the cranium, that is the part A, and the function of that would be it protects the brain. That is the options that we have there. So, the fluid is responsible for the absorption of the shock, so we are not allocating a mark for that. So we are moving on then to section B, question number 2. So unfortunately in the English question paper we had a problem with these labels, the B and the C there. So in the Afrikaans question paper there were no problems there, but in the English paper, after a lot of corrections, it still wasn't corrected when we received that. So identify number B and number C. So if you swap those two, in this instance number B will then be the epididymis, and if they swapped it, the learners, you can also mark urethra there because they could have written the B there. And then at number C, when urethra is the correct answer, you can also mark epididymis because the C could also have been there. So only for this question paper, it's a concession on the English memo. So just to make sure that we have epididymis either there or urethra there, or urethra or epididymis there. So you can either mark one of them if they didn't label it as it was provided in the Afrikaans part of the paper. So let's go to the next one. State the function of part A. Part A will be the acrosome, and that would be the fact that it secretes secretes enzymes, and those enzymes will be responsible for diluting or breaking down the cell membrane of the ovum, but they only ask the acrosome, so it secretes enzymes. So that is the part of the memo. Describe the process of spermatogenesis. So it has been revised in the new exam guidelines. So I can look at the marks that we are allocating there in this memo. So the first one will be the fact that it's controlled by testosterone. It is under the influence of testosterone, spermatogenesis. Then the seminiferous tubulus, or you can either say the testis. Diploid cells will undergo meiosis and form haploid sperm cells. So those are, don't only mark keywords, but those are where the ticks are allocated. For testosterone, for the tubulus or the testis, diploid undergoes meiosis and forms haploid cells. So please, it must make sense, but those are the words that we need to see in the answer to receive those 5 marks. They are very specific on that. So let's go to the next question, number 2.1.4. The male reproductive system has 3 glands that secretes fluids to form semen. Name the gland, or give the name of each gland and the function of that fluid that is secreted. So again, if we go to the marking guidelines, it's quite clear there. We have the seminal vesicles, and they provide nutrition or food. Then we have the prostate gland, and that neutralizes the acids in the urethra or in the vagina. And then the last one is the Cowper gland, and that promotes the movement of the sperm. So those are the 3 glands that contributes to semen, the formation of semen. So it is to secrete a fluid to form semen. So those are the correct 3 glands and the reason what, or the function of the fluid that they secrete. So that is the end of question number 2.1. Let's continue then to question number 2.2. The diagram below represents some changes that occurred in the human female body during the menstrual cycle. This is a very important part of the question for you to be able to answer this correctly. The letters A to D represents hormones. So there we have the pituitary gland, we have hormone A and B, we have a Gravian follicle, and then we have this part. We have hormone C, and there, I hope you can see it now, there is hormone D and the ovum. We have the endometrium, the lining of the uterus indicated here from day 0 to up until day 28. So determine the duration of the menstrual cycle according to this diagram. According to this diagram, it will then be 28 days. So a lot of questions were asked on question 2.2.2. Name 2 organs of the female reproductive system. If we look at most of our textbooks or our references that we use, the organs of the female reproductive system are stated clearly there to show changes during the menstrual cycle. So the only 2 organs that will be accepted is the ovary and the uterus. Those are the 2 organs that will be accepted, even though we are not concentrating on the fact that students need to know what organs are important, but more importantly are the changes. It is important to know that during the menstrual cycle, we have the cycle that occurs in the ovarium and we have the cycle that occurs in the uterus. So those are the 2 organs involved in the menstrual cycle. So before answering any questions on that. Number 2.2.3, name hormone number D. There is hormone number D being secreted there. So it is estrogen. State 2 functions of hormone B as indicated in the diagram. So hormone B will there be secreted by the pituitary gland, and it will have an impact there, and it will also have an impact there. So the 2 functions that we are allocating marks will then be, it stimulates ovulation and it develops the corpus luteum. That is the responsibility of LH, and that is the hormone that is represented in number B, LH. So if we go back then to the next part, give one visible reason in from the diagram that suggests the fertilization has occurred. We only have 2 things that we can look at for that, and that would be the corpus luteum. So in this case, the corpus luteum stays intact, and then we can look at the endometrium and the endometrium wall. So this only goes up until 28. And it started at 0. So we don't have an inclination of what is going to happen at day 29, and 30 and 31. If it were indicated here, we could have used this as on the memo, but the endometrium remains thick or does not shed. That is not visible at this stage on the 28-day cycle that we have in front of us. So actually the only mark we can allocate there is the corpus luteum remains intact at this stage. So the last question here will be, explain the negative feedback mechanism between hormones A and C if fertilization occurs. Again, I had a lot of questions on question 2.2.6 on the pituitary gland, but let us look at the marking guidelines, and we have simplified that memo somewhat. So I'm first going with the second part. It's not in your memo at this stage, so you can add it, or we will be sending out the addendum to this memorandum shortly after this presentation. So the question there will be, explain the negative feedback mechanisms between hormone A and C if fertilization occurs. Okay, so the first thing is continued high levels of progesterone in the blood inhibits the secretion of hormone A, and that ensures that no follicles will be formed or are formed anymore. So continued, they can use other words to describe that, or they can still say the corpus luteum didn't degenerate, and therefore continued to or still secreted high levels of progesterone. Inhibiting is a mark, the secretion of FSH or less hormone A, and ensuring that no follicles are formed. Again, in the marking session of 2020, it was put a lot of emphasis on the fact that there were no follicles formed to ensure that fertilization did not occur. So if you go back to the first part of the memo, as it was in your memo that you received, please emphasize the fact that they must say it's a high progesterone level. You cannot only allocate a mark if they say the progesterone levels inhibit the secretion. They must have high. So that is compulsory. They cannot use any other description there. So if we go to question number 2.3. So this is question number 2.3. The following diagram represents a human fetus during gestation. Identify part A and part B. Now, part A also has questions on that because it's the placenta. And if we look at, explain one way in which part A protects the fetus, at question number 2.3.2, we will definitely know that A is the placenta, but we did listen and we did make an adaptation or amended memo there. So if learners wrote chorionic villi, they can also receive a mark for that. So please make sure that you add that to your memo or your discussion. So number B will then be the amniotic fluid. But also, since we had in June paper a big discussion on the amniotic cavity, we are adding the amniotic cavity also there as part of that memo. So please make sure it can either be amniotic fluid or it can be the amniotic cavity, because at this stage you will not be able to distinguish between those two on this specific diagram. If we go to the next one, explain one way in which part A protects the fetus. So there's a lot of discussion on which functions from the placenta is only for the protection of the fetus, but we have allocated the marks as follow. The placenta acts as a microfilter, and that is important. That is a mark to prevent pathogenic organisms into the blood of the fetus, or prevent it from falling ill, or prevent microorganisms from getting into the blood of the fetus. And then we have antibodies of the mother provide the fetus with passive immunity. Then we have it secretes progesterone, and the explanation prevents the endometrium from disintegrating or having a miscarriage. And then we also added the placenta is responsible for the excretion of waste products, protecting the fetus from increasing toxicity or then death. So I just want to emphasize, if we look at the question in the question paper, please make sure they say explain one, because the learners are quick to name 2 ways in which part A is protected, but they need to explain one. So if they say microfilter, they must say microorganisms are prevented from moving there. Antibodies prevent or give passive immunity. Secretion of progesterone keeps the endometrium intact. And then the placenta, the secreting of waste products protect the fetus from death or then toxicity. So please make sure that there's an explanation with that question. And then the following question is also explained 2 ways in which the development of the fetus would be negatively affected if part A is caught around the ankle of the fetus and blood flow to the fetus is restricted. So we are emphasizing on that part of the question. The blood flow to the fetus is restricted. So let's look at that. So again, the first one there, it's an explained question. So nutrients and oxygen won't be able to transport to the fetus, and that will lead to no growth or death, or the fetus may abort. So that is the explanation. So waste products will not be transported back to the placenta. Again, it will lead to toxicity, or it will lead to the fetus dying, or it will lead to abort the fetus. So because this is an explained question, we need to look at the 2 times 2 there. So otherwise this question might have been better suited as a 3-mark question. But as it is now 4 marks, we need to accommodate that on the memo. So if we go to question 2.4, we have the diagram below represents a portion of the central nervous system. Number 2.4.1, name the type of reaction that is shown in this diagram. That is a reflex reaction. And then state the significance of this reaction mentioned. So why is this important? It is very important. We have reflex action there, and then it protects the body. So the tick were here at the back. Please move the tick so that it's only going for protect the body. So from further injury doesn't need to be there. It's only to protect the body. That is why we have reflex reactions. And then the amount of synapses on the diagram, there will be 2 synapses on that specific reflex arch in this specific question. And then if we go to 2.4.4, use a flow diagram to give the correct sequence of neurons from receptor to the effector. It is 2 marks there. And if we look at the memo, it is important that it is 2 marks or nothing. You can't give 1 mark if one of them are in the correct sequence. It's either 2 marks or it's nothing. So it's sensory, inter and motor neuron in that specific sequence. So if they only have 2 or 1 correct, they will receive no marks there. So if they are correct sequence and they are in the correct names are given, you will receive 2 marks. Then we go to state 2 functions of the myelin sheet in neurons. If I go to that part of the memo, the transmission of impulses is accelerated. This is the one thing that we already know. And then it insulates the nerve fibers. You can also move that tick there for one-way transmission of impulses. And at this stage, we are also indicating a mark for the one-way transmission of impulses, but not for so they can either say it accelerates and it is a one-way transmission of impulses, so we can put that in slash there, and you can isolate the nerves or one-way transmission of impulses. I would like to emphasize the fact that in our textbooks or in our references that we use, the myelin sheet is doing the acceleration and it is doing the isolation. The one-way transmission is actually done by the synapse. So we must actually emphasize that also to our learners when we do this memo with them. So please emphasize that when you do that with your learners. So question 2.4.6, explain why no pain will be experienced if the spinal cord is damaged above the area shown in the diagram. So if we have the brain and we have the spinal cord, the question says, explain why pain will not be experienced if the spinal cord is damaged above the area. So this will be a reflex arch somewhere down the spinal cord, and they say if there were damage to the spinal cord above this specific reflex arch, then we will need to know why the impulses will not be traveling to this part of our brain. So the memo allocated the following marks there. The impulses will not be transmitted to the cerebrum, where pain will be interpreted or experienced. So that is a level D question. So just make sure that you allocate the marks as they are there. 2.4.6, tabulate 3 differences between the human nervous system and the human endocrine system. So there are the responses that you have on your memos. The response for nervous system is rapid. The response in the endocrine system is slow. The duration of the response is rapid for nervous system, and the duration of the response is slow for the endocrine system. And then we have electrical impulses, or impulses are sent through the nervous system, and hormones are being secreted for the endocrine. Impulses are sent through the neurons, and hormones are sent through the blood. And then we also added this to the memo. Specific targets are effectors to the nervous system, for instance, muscles and glands. And the endocrine has a widespread target, or they have specific target organs. So that would be like the pancreas or the thyroid. So they have target organs, and these have effectors. They have specific target organs. So please make sure that you add that to the memo, and we will be sending you this addendum. That is the end of that question. Then this is the last part of the question, question number 3. The following graph shows the changes in the central diameter of the lens of the human eye while looking at an object at different distances from the eye. So if we look at the heading here, at the central diameter of the lens in relation to the distance of an object from the eye, and I would like to emphasize this axis, central diameter of the lens. So when we use this in a discussion, we must use this as it is precisely provided to us on the x-axis. So on the y-axis, sorry. So please make sure that you use those words exactly like it's there. But let's start with the first question. Name the physical process that is illustrated in the graph, that is accommodation. State one conclusion that can be drawn from the results in this specific graph. So there are a few options in the memo, and again we've altered it, so please look there. The smaller the distance of the object is from the eye, the larger the diameter of the lens. The further the distance of the object is from the eye, the smaller the diameter of the lens. Or you can also say the diameter of the lens increases if the object is closer to the eye, and the diameter of the lens decreases the further the object is from the eye. Please, we have bracketed central, meaning that you don't have to use it in this discussion. But I would like to emphasize that previously in the discussions at the end of the year, it was crucial to use the y-axis or the x-axis labels as they were provided, to use them as they is in a discussion. So please emphasize that. Also, we have to look at the label of the graphs to find the dependent and independent variables in a specific study. So please make sure that we use those information. Then explain 3 ways in which the lens is structurally suited to perform each function. So number 3.1.3, can we go there? And then the first mark will be for the fact that the lens is elastic, and the second mark will be for the fact that it can change its shape. As you've seen, there's a red mark that was, the tick was moved there. It was at accommodation, but the fact that it is convex is also being mentioned at the end there. So please make sure that we do allocate a mark for the fact that we say the lens is elastic and can change shape. So change shape is the explanation for the fact that it is elastic. So the next one is the lens is transparent and light rays can then pass through the lens. That is important. And then the fact that the lens is biconvex to refract light rays. So number 1, the lens is biconvex, and that would lead us for the light rays to be refracted. So please, that is also very, very important when we discuss that. Let's go then to the next question. Describe the changes that take place in the eye when the person looks up from reading a book to view an object that is further than 6 meters away from the eye. So this is accommodation. So if we look at this, 3.1.4, the ciliary muscle relax, the suspensory ligaments become taut, the ciliary body moves further away from the lens, tension in the lens increases, the lens becomes less convex, and refraction power of the lens decreases. Those are the discussion, that is the discussion, and those are the words sticked there that are important there. So any 4 there, there's more than 4 marks that are easily received there. This was very poorly translated into Afrikaans. I will have a look at that just now. I just want to emphasize one thing that is very important in answering a question on accommodation. And marks are lost here because students don't understand it or is not answering it in the correct way. It is very important if we say it is near vision. Let's look at this one. The ciliary muscle contracts and the suspensory ligament slackens. Suspensory ligaments cannot contract on its own. So they either become taut or tighten or they slacken. So please, it is very important that you know that suspensory ligaments cannot contract on their own. They either become taut or they slacken. Then again, light rays are reflected and light rays are focused onto the retina. So children write more light rays are reflected. And actually that is wrong. Light rays are refracted more. More light will indicate that we are talking about the pupil mechanism. So light rays are reflected more. But that is very technical. But just make sure when they discuss that in eye accommodation and in pupil mechanism that they know the difference between those two. So I would just like to quickly go to the Afrikaans memo on that, because that, as I said, was very poorly translated in Afrikaans. So in Afrikaans we have die ciliaarspier ontspan, suspensoriese ligamente word styf, ciliaarspier beweeg verder van die lens af. Spanning op die lens neem toe, die lens word minder konveks en die brekingsvermoë van die lens neem af. So just make sure, as I said, the mistakes that was there. So let's go to the next question, number 3.2. Number 3.2 is the question on the balance. So it refers to the diagram illustrates an athlete moving from a stationary sitting position with his head down to a running very fast and facing forward position. So there were no changes made to the memo there. So let's just have a look there. Changes in the direction and the speed of the movement of the head are detected by. Okay, so this introduction is very important because it is the change in the direction and it is the change in the speed of the movement. So please, there's only one mark allocated for that, but you must name direction and you must name speed in this first line of your discussion. So the change in direction and speed are monitored by the crista, which is in the ampulla or in the circular, semicircular channels. Change to the position of the head. So any changes to the position of the head will therefore be noted by the crista and detected by the maculae, which is in the succulus and utriculus. They are then stimulated and converted into an impulse, and it will be transmitted via the auditory nerve to the cerebellum, which is the part that is responsible for the balance. But I also would like to emphasize this last part here, and which impulses are sent to the skeleton muscles. Last year in the marking session, it was compulsory that you had that as a part of the question. Impulses are sent back because they ask what adaptations or what was done by the brain. So it sent impulses back to the skeleton muscle to correct those, to ensure that balance is kept properly. So please make sure that you also teach the learners to write that last part. It can be a separate mark at the end of the year if they prefer it like that. 3.3. The graph below shows the blood glucose concentration of two people, A and B, over a period of 2 hours after they had consumed 100 grams of a glucose drink. So there's the time, there's the glucose concentration, there's person A and person B. So 3.1.1, person A is not able to regulate his blood glucose level effectively. Name the disease that this specific person will have, so that is diabetes. So also, if you see in the memo, they can only write diabetes, it's fine like that. So we can move that tick there. It's not only for diabetes mellitus. Mellitus is not compulsory in that answer. Explain one possible reason why the blood glucose concentration remains high in person A. So there's 2 marks allocated there. So the pancreas of the person produce low levels of insulin, or cells are insulin resistant. Blood glucose does not convert to glycogen, and glucose is not absorbed by the cells. So there's a low level of insulin, and therefore glucose cannot be transformed to glycogen. So those are the 2 marks that we can allocate there. If we go back then, 3.3.2, calculate the difference between the blood glucose concentration of person A and B 120 minutes after ingestion of glucose. We also had a discussion on this, and if we look here, there is definitely truth in the fact that that can also be higher than 12. So we have added that. So firstly, we can remove the units. The units does not count a mark in this specific question. So therefore, it can either be 12 minus 4 and leaves us with 8, or it can be 13 minus 4 and it leaves us with 9. So you can allocate a mark for either the 12 or the 13, and the calculation there of them. So just make sure that concession that was used there. Then if we go to question 3.3.3, we have, from the graph, describe 2 visible differences in the glucose concentration of person A and B over the period of the investigation. Now usually if we have this, we must have a comparison between the 2. But they are saying describe 2 visible differences, and they are saying between person A and person B already in the question. So the fact that they are saying describe is now making it a little bit difficult to do the comparison between the 2. And because they are saying person A and person B, we are going to allocate the marks as follows. The blood glucose level of A is always higher than that of person B. So again, if they only said the blood glucose level of person A is always higher, it will have to be correct there, because the comparison is between A and B in the question. There is a greater increase in the blood glucose level in person A after ingestion of glucose compared to B. So again, if they say there's a greater increase in the blood glucose level of person A after indigesting glucose, you will have to indicate or give those 2 marks. And then there's another option. It takes longer for blood glucose level to stabilize for person A compared to person B, where the level stabilizes quicker. Okay, so it takes longer for the blood glucose level to stabilize for person A compared to person B, and then B will, where the level stabilizes quicker. So those are the 4 marks allocated there. And then if we go to question 3.3.4, name 2 hormones that will have the opposite effect on your blood glucose level than that of insulin. So it will be glycogen to glucose. So those 2 hormones will then be glycagon and adrenaline. Those are the 2 hormones responsible for that specific changes that occurs in the body. The second last part here is 3.4. The flow diagram represents osmoregulation in the human body. A warm day, low intake of fluids, and a person is active. There's the receptors in the hypothalamus. The gland A secretes hormone B, effector C responds, and the water level returns to normal. So the question is, what is osmoregulation? And if we look here, it's a maintaining a constant internal water balance. So the fact that it's a constant internal and water balance is the second mark, because that's a 2-mark question. Then name gland A that would be responding to the hypothalamus. So that would be the pituitary gland or the hypophysis. And then we have name hormone B, gland A. Then the pituitary gland secretes hormone B that is responsible for water levels. So that will be ADH if we look at that. So there are those correct answers. On the next page, we have this discussion. Number 3.4.3, explain why a person may dehydrate if a tumor on gland A prevents it from secreting hormone B on a hot day. So, let's look at that memo. The water levels is below normal because they are saying if they dehydrate. So no ADH or hormone B can be secreted because of the cancer. The renal tubes do not become more permeable. Water is not reabsorbed into the blood and it is lost through the urine. So you can also say here, more diluted urine will be excreted. Number 3.5.1 will then be the last question we have here, and this is on the auxin. 3.5, a group of grade 12 learners carried out an investigation to determine the effect of gravity on the direction of growth of young roots of seedlings. Apparatus A, they placed 6 germinated seeds horizontal on a moist disc, covered the seedlings on the clinostat with a wide mouth glass jar, switched the clinostat in A on so that the seedlings were continuously rotating. In apparatus B, they placed 6 germinated seedlings horizontally on a moist disc, placed the cork disc on its side and covered it with a wide mouth glass jar. And they did not rotate the seedlings. They left both apparatus untouched for 2 days in a dark cupboard. The investigation was repeated for a few times. And then the diagram below shows the apparatus that was set up. So there's the diagram. There we have the clinostat that would be turning. So those seedlings will have the effect of the clinostat. And this one does not have a clinostat. It is static. It doesn't move. So for this investigation, they are saying, please identify the independent variable. So they did put it in a dark cupboard. Look up there. They did put it in a dark cupboard, so there's no sunlight responsible. The clinostat has the effect of the gravity. So the independent variable for this will be gravity. Gravity will be a mark there. And then the dependent variable will then be the direction of the growth. Again, move the tick because this is also part of the question, the young roots. So the direction of the growth. This is on young roots. So the direction of the growth is the dependent variable in this specific investigation. If we go to the next questions, name 2 ways in which the learners could have increased the validity of this investigation other than those mentioned. So other than those mentioned here. So that makes it a little bit more difficult, but asking a question on reliability is always, asking a question on the validity is always opening the door for a few possibilities. They should use the same amount of water and type of soil. Species of seedlings, age of the seedlings, method of mounting, and then environmental conditions. So we are going to allocate a mark either for environmental conditions or the water or the soil. So I will put it on the memo like that. It's amended. So those two will move to either the environmental conditions or the soil or the water. So they will only have one option to be marked there correctly. And then the same apparatus, the same person doing the experiment. But I would like to emphasize this, that if you can allocate a mark for the increased validity in this experiment and you agree with that, you can allocate a mark for the discussion of the child. So please make sure, we did try to put all the options there, but please make sure that you use that. Okay, I just want to emphasize this. If the learners write the environmental conditions, so they can allocate a mark there. But if they write the amount of water and the type of soil, they are separately also going to be allocated a mark. So I will show on the amended memo, but please don't penalize the children there. Allocate marks there, please. Number 3.5.3, name one way in which the learners ensured the reliability of this investigation. This investigation was repeated. So the memo that we have, they repeated the investigation for a few times, and we added they used 6 seedlings, implicating that they suggested it was a large sample size. To me and you, 6 might feel not that many, but they used 6 seedlings, indicating a large sample size. So you can also allocate a mark for the fact that they noticed that. And there's nothing, but yes, so that is fine. Explain the purpose of the rotating clinostat in diagram A. So this is quite a mouthful. It is a control. It compares the result of the experiment with the control that was added to the memo, and then if there therefore lacks the factor being tested, or therefore you remove gravity, or you only test one factor, that is also a mark that can be allocated there. So it's the control. You use the control to compare the results, and then you can say they only tested one factor at a time, or they excluded the force of gravity or anything in that region. So there's 3 marks allocated there. Again, we added the comparison of the control. Again, there were a question on June now, when we mark it in June 2021, there were a question on the control. So if you can look at that paper, and just look at the way in which they marked that, on how you had to discuss the importance of the control. You couldn't mention this general compare the results of the experiment. You had to specifically say what the results in this experiment was that was compared. So if you can lay your hands on June 21, it was distributed in the Free State. Please have a look at that question on the control there. So, we are going to remove this, providing the growth reaction of the seedlings, because that is a repetition of that one there. So it is already included in that part of the memo. Explain one reason why the apparatus was placed in a dark cupboard. So that is the last one, to remove the influence of sunlight on the growth of the roots, or to remove phototropism. And then again, to test only one factor, or because the roots are also negatively phototropic, grows or away from light, or to make sure that we only test one factor. That is why we put it in the dark cupboard. So there are 2 marks allocated there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this memo discussion. for the questions. I just want to quickly look at the Afrikaans memo, but I think it's all the same from there on. I did indicate the things in the Afrikaans memo that was disturbing or that was troublesome up until this stage. So thank you very much, and very good luck with the marking and paper number 2. Thank you.